Dick York disappeared from Bewitched in 1969, and the studio told America it was exhaustion. But his family kept a secret for decades. In 2003, hidden footage finally surfaced showing what really happened on set. A collapse, a scream that lasted 20 minutes, and a deal that banned York from ever speaking the truth. By the time he died in 1992, he'd gone from Hollywood, started cleaning toilets for survival. His wife had discovered over 200 pills hidden throughout their home. Today, his son is finally revealing what the cameras never showed. He was born on September 4th, 1928 in Fort Wayne, Indiana, at a time when the country was still licking its wounds from the Great Depression. His father, Bernard, tried to hold things together with whatever work he could get as a salesman, while his mother, Betty, stitched clothes and eventually opened a small beauty shop just to keep the lights on. But inside all this hardship, there was something strange happening, something no one expected. A Catholic nun at Dick's parochial school noticed something different about the boy, not in the way he behaved, but in the way he spoke. His voice had a rhythm, a richness, a sharpness that didn't belong in that rundown Midwestern neighborhood. She pulled him aside and gave him something that would change everything. Her belief. She encouraged him to speak, to perform, to treat his voice like an instrument. That spark lit a fire. When the family moved to Chicago around the time Dick was 10, they weren't chasing dreams. They were chasing survival. But Chicago turned out to be the best possible accident. The city was alive with voices. Radios hummed in every kitchen. And Dick, he sat next to them, soaking in every word like it was gospel. He didn't just listen to shows like Fibber McGee and Molly. He absorbed them, mimicked them, lived inside their rhythm until the voices became part of his own. And by the time he was 15, he wasn't just another kid with a hobby. He was the lead voice on a nationwide CBS radio show. That Brewster boy. One day, he's copying radio stars from a cramped apartment. The next, he's the one other kids are trying to copy. He wasn't the first Joey Brewster. 2 others had played the role before him, but something clicked when Dick stepped up to the microphone. His timing, his tone, the way he turned ordinary words into moments. It wasn't training. It was something deeper. The show ran for years, sponsored by Quaker Oats, and broadcast into millions of homes. Dick York, teenage boy from a broke family in Chicago, was suddenly a household name before he even finished high school. But just because he was making money didn't mean the money lasted. The Yorks had scraped by for too long to feel stable. Bernard's sales work was still shaky. There were still days when food was thin and rent was uncertain. Dick worked whatever gigs he could, never really relaxing because he'd seen what happens when the money stops. And he never forgot. Years later, when he owned property, he wouldn't kick people out for missing rent. He let them stay, and he kept letting them stay, even when it drained him. He just couldn't forget what it felt like to be close to losing everything. His early years weren't just shaped by money or radio scripts. There was a moment when everything almost stopped. A health scare. Some sources point to polio during his teens. Others are more vague. But what is clear is that Dick York didn't come out of those years unscathed. He was fragile in ways he didn't show. The real blow came later. 1959, on a movie set. Pushing a handcar alongside Gary Cooper, and they came to Cordura. Something inside him tore. The muscles along the right side of my back. They just snapped. He'd later say that was the beginning of chronic pain, of painkillers, of a downward slope he'd never quite recover from. But the seeds of that fragility were there long before. There's some confusion about when his radio career really started. Some say 15, but others, including a few buried interviews, say it was 1941 when he was just 13. Either way, he was too young to be carrying the weight of a national show. And yet he did. He carried it for years. And it wasn't just about fame. That paycheck lifted his family out of despair. At a time when some nights meant skipping dinner, York's radio checks put food on the table. Then it all collapsed. Not because of ratings, not because of talent, but because of politics. In 1945, the show's writers, Pauline Hopkins and Owen Vincent, were accused of sympathizing with communists. It was the early Cold War, and paranoia was currency. They'd been sending aid to communist forces fighting Nazis, and that was enough. The ad agency told Dick to distance himself. He was 17. He could have kept his job, but he didn't. I didn't know what it was all about, he later said, but I was with them. That loyalty cost him the role. The show was rebranded, recast, and moved on without him. But he didn't stop. He joined Jack Armstrong, All-American Boy, as Billy Fairfield and stuck with it for 6 years. Steady work, familiar scripts, comfort in repetition. He also jumped onto shows like Grand Marquis, Meet the Meeks, My True Story, and dozens more, hundreds of episodes. Somewhere along the line, he developed nearly 400 character voices, from gruff old men to dreamy kids. It wasn't just acting anymore. It was vocal architecture. And on one of those sets, in between takes, he met a teenage commercial reader named Joan Alt. She was 17. He was 23. Her parents hated him, said he was broke, said he was a nobody, said they'd have him arrested. So they did what young people in love do. They ran, drove to Rockford, Illinois at 2 in the morning, paid $5 to a justice of the peace, married in secret. The gossip columns had a field day. Her father disowned her. Her mother cried for days. And Dick, he just held her hand through it all. Then came TV. His first role was on Lights Out, a horror anthology on NBC in 1950. The episode was titled The Man Who Couldn't Die. York delivered an 8-minute monologue about eternal life, filmed live with no breaks. His performance disturbed viewers so much that NBC got 47 complaints. One woman swore her husband couldn't sleep for a week. The network loved it. So did critics. By 1952, he landed a spot on Going My Way with Gene Kelly, earning $750 per episode. But it wasn't smooth. The network's Catholic advisors hated his humor. He clashed with them, nearly got fired for a joke about confession. Kelly saved him again. But York's refusal to follow stiff scripts made producers nervous. His scenes needed retakes. Directors complained. He was gaining a reputation, not for bad work, but for being hard to contain. That reputation got worse after a failed pilot called The Marriage in 1953. Executives said he looked too young to be a husband. Then they leaked his audition tape as a joke, passing around studios as what not to do. York had no idea until he showed up at auditions and got told no before he read a line. It wrecked him. He went 6 months without work. The humiliation nearly ended his career. Then came the Jack Benny program in 1954. 20 million people watched him play a hitchhiker. He was funny, really funny, too funny. Benny exploded during rehearsal when York's ad-libs got more laughs than his own lines. "This is my show," Benny shouted. York was cut down to 3 minutes. That was the end of their working relationship and the start of another blacklist. At 27, Dick York wasn't supposed to outshine anyone. Not in a town already packed with charmers and cuners, but he did. 3 auditions later, he'd beat out 200 other hopefuls, including a rising Tony Curtis for Universal Pictures' role in Someone Stole My Gal. The studio gambled $850,000 on the picture. Dick got $15,000 and 3 musical numbers, 2 studio days to record them, and 1 very long kiss with June Haver. That 18-second kiss took 14 takes. Somewhere between those takes, they were snapped sharing lunch. The tabloids ran with it. Rumors flew. Box office jumped 23%. Even Fred McMurray showed up on set twice, just watching. When the dust settled, the film grossed $2.1 million. Dick's fan mail went from zilch to 400 letters a week. And Hollywood had a new heartthrob. But Hollywood doesn't stay soft for long. 1 year later, on Stage 7 at Republic Studios, the chase scene for the naked street turned into a near-death moment. A prop dynamite charge meant to dazzle exploded just 4 feet from York. Real black powder. Wrong timing. Both eyebrows gone, cheek burned, metal in the face. 23 stitches deep. Co-star Farley Granger was knocked cold. The studio bled $75,000 in delays. York filed a $12,500 claim, but something more lasting entered his life that day. Painkillers, Demerol, codeine. It started small for the burns, for the ache, for the things that wouldn't stop hurting. By 1958, York's talent had become a threat, especially to someone like Bing Crosby. When the Going My Way adaptation took shape, Crosby, still clinging to his image at 55, made sure York's light didn't shine too bright. Crosby got 27 script changes pushed through. Dick lost 15 minutes of screen time, 3 songs, and a powerful confession scene. "Too vulnerable," said Crosby. "Made him look soft." Lighting changed. Close-ups redone to flatter one man and dull the other. But Variety still called York magnetic and natural. And that only made things worse behind the scenes. Then came Operation Madball, 1957's riot in a can. York played Private Hogan, throwing a burlesque bash with real strippers from Minsky's, including Lily St. Cyr. 8 seconds of topless scandal. That was enough. Censors panicked. Columbia made 2 cuts, 1 clean, 1 dirty. Texas, Georgia, and Utah banned both. The studio lost $400,000, but the buzz worked in York's favor. Fan mail hit 600 a week. Harry Conn called him box office gold. Rebellious, edgy, bankable. All because of one wild party and a few too many drinks for the MPs. But July 23, 1959, changed everything. They Came to Cordura was filming in Arizona, heat blazing at 118 degrees. York and Gary Cooper were lifting a 400-pound handcar. The scene was simple, just push it 15 feet. But on the third take, when Cooper let go, York didn't. He kept lifting alone. Something in his back gave way with a sound like a snapped branch. L4 and L5 vertebrae compressed. He collapsed, screamed. They gave him aspirin. It was 3 hours before someone realized he couldn't stand. 97 days in a Phoenix hospital, $18,000 in bills. Morphine, Demoral, then something experimental. That's when the dependency stopped being subtle. Despite the warnings, York signed onto the Flying Fontaine in 1960. A circus drama, aerial stunts. He did them all, injured spine and all, swallowing painkillers between takes. Audiences didn't see the trembling hands or the slanted board he used backstage to lie flat. They saw a trapeze artist. They saw commitment. They didn't see the beginning of the end. By 1961, Lover Comeback was meant to be light rom-com fluff with Doris Day and Rock Hudson. But behind the smile, York was consuming up to 20 Vicodin a day. He nearly collapsed during a kiss.